Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's episode, I'm blessed to have with me on doing this interview episode on lactation was somebody who reached out to me over the last couple of weeks on this very subject that was turns out to be quite fascinating and really impacts a lot of people's lives. When Brooke reached out to me, I really had not a very large understanding of the world of lactation as far as the fetish that is involved with it. So its proper name being lactophilia, and kind of rolling through there. Through my conversations with Brooke, who was kind enough to join me on the show today, uh, I've gotten a chance to learn more from a psychological side. But today, that I get a chance to sit with Brooke here, we're gonna get to hear more about the intimate side, the emotional connection that it brings, how she got involved, the conversations surrounding that. So, without further ado, thank you, Brooke, for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for putting such amazing content out into our little kink universe.
Uh,
It's appreciated.
well, thank you. I think it's really important that we start to get an idea of the things that connect to us, and
Mhm.
all of us how we are in this big fetish universe, and then the little kink worlds that really kind of entice us, and so on and so forth. Um, when you first approached me with this topic, it was quite interesting. I've heard of, obviously like adult nursing relationships where people breastfeed. How did you get first involved with the whole lactation fetish?
Hmm. Um, so it, there are a lot of kinks that sort of sit on my periphery, I guess. Um, and it just sort of takes the right person to come into your life for you to have the opportunity to explore that, or give it any real traction. So I first spoke to my dominant, must be coming up on a year and a half ago now,
Right.
and he was very forthcoming about that being his main fetish. And so we just talked a little about that and maintained a friendship. At the time, I was quite intrigued
That
to know what the draw card was for him.
right.
Um, And eventually, as that friendship turned into a play dynamic and then a power exchange dynamic, lactation became a big part of that. And I've just found my own intrigue and joy in it along the way, really.
Right.
Mm.
How did you're having this conversation over a period of time.
Mhm.
How did it first begin for you? Obviously, great. I'm into this. I've got an interest in this kink. You've got an interest in this kink. Great. So we're both interested. What becomes the next foray into it for you? Was it more of the mental dynamic of preparing yourself to start? I mean, do you have children already?
I do have children,
Okay.
which increased my chances of being able to relactate,
Okay.
which was helpful. Um, For me, everything definitely spans from a mental side. So for me to be involved in something that I consider to be um, a fairly deep act of submission, it's not something for the faint-hearted to go through this process. So that required me finding someone that I have a great deal of respect and trust for. Um, we talk a lot about being risk aware in kink in physical terms, but I think that what can be even more important than that is being psychologically and emotionally safe. So, lactation at its core is body modification,
Right.
and that's a big deal. Um, so, people who are going into this casually, I think, will come up against a lot of roadblocks because it does require two people being equally invested, the logistics of privacy when you're involving your work and your home life. I think it's only possible in a bonded experience where you have someone to support you and celebrate those milestones along your lactation journey, if that makes sense.
No,
So mental for sure.
yeah, no, I mean that does make a lot of sense, and you're right. We really talk about, as much as we can be. People often throw the word safety around, and I've talked about this all the time. Safety is only a word that you can hold between. You can't even hold that between your hands. So we try to be as risk aware and calculate all the risks, even medically or physically what we're going to do, but we don't often think about the emotional impact or the cognitive impact it's going to have on somebody when we're asking them to do anything, especially if they've never been
Mm,
impacted before, or,
mm,
slavery is a new concept. Uh,
mm. Well, I was reading something recently where someone was discussing orgasm control
mhm.
and how that can have psychological ramifications, if a dynamic or a relationship ends. And I think all these things need to be taken into account to make, to weigh up when you're making those big decisions. And lactation is one of those things because you can't just turn it off overnight once you've begun.
Right, right. And, so interesting enough, for, I guess for a little bit of context, did you, or how do you go about that, starting that?
Mm. I uh, put a lot of research in online. The protocols of the Goldfarb method for inducing lactation are what seem to produce the best results. I really liked the idea because it was a bit of a long game, so it's something that promises, more milk for the time that's invested. And in a current climate of sort of instant gratification, it didn't bother me to take things slowly if I knew that there was going to be a better outcome at the end. So while I can't speak on medications as that's outside of the scope of my sort of practice to give advice on that, but there's a lot of information available on the internet. I began with taking hormones for 6 months, and we just incorporated a lot of breast stimulation and play into our experiences. And then at the end of those 6 months began the phase for me to use hospital grade breast pumps to sort of boost my supply. And that's where we're at the moment. Just enjoying
Fruits of your
the
labor.
ongoing fruits of our labour. Yes,
Okay, so
absolutely.
obviously, when we get into the manual stimulation, is that something you just do by yourself, or is this something that you and your dominant share in the experience together?
Um, Both. Um, so when we are apart, that's something that I need to maintain by myself. When I say that it's a quite a large undertaking, I'm pumping for 20 minutes 4 times a day at the moment to sort of maintain supply. And then that is something that we definitely share together, which is quite a nice bonding experience. And the thing that I love about lactation is that, it can take on any context that you'd like it to. So it can be framed in an adult nursing situation where things are more of a calm and nurturing vibe. I um, I really enjoy the degradation and objectification sort of mood that can be created, which is quite erotic. That can be where milking becomes part of more of a heavy bondage situation. So just like any kink, even rope, it's the mood and the intent behind it that can change the context of how you're experiencing that shared experience. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It
Mm.
does. And do you feel like on a different level, because this is something so unique that you share between the two of you, that this has brought you to a deeper level of emotional connectivity?
Uh, on my part, absolutely. It's the definitely the deepest act of service and mission that I have undertaken at this point. It feels very, very primal, the idea of sort of making milk to please my dominant, and then the idea of being consumed is again a psychological thing. I think I posted on one of your comments that there's this sort of ownership quality to it where it's not unlike wearing a collar, but it's a collar that you can't, take off on a whim. It
Absolutely.
feels like, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
And it's funny when I posted that discussion on social media about the whole lactation fetish, and I was really kind of curious to see what the response was. I was quite surprised at the amount, the scope that I received, not only from you but from others, um, about their experiences being, you know, taking part in this fetish, being, I guess, the proper term. Do you use the term hue cow at all?
I don't mind. I don't mind the term "hukau." I'm fine with that. I think that the origins of hukau was probably more the aesthetic as well, where it's come from hentai, and that can be really cute. I'm not at all opposed to all of the cow print aesthetic
Do you want
that
to walk? Do you want to
flies
walk
around in
me
fetish.
through that? So, because I don't know, I've heard the term over the years, and I always kind of just associated it with obviously a human cow, so obviously they're producing milk. But do they take this further in that respect, and are they dressing up as well?
So this might surprise you, but I've actually never watched any. I've never watched hentai. I'm not someone who uses pornography all that often,
Okay,
and when I do, it's usually a audio version of what floats my boat than visual. But what I do know is that part of the reasoning behind a lot of the hukau pornography being out there is animated because it was really difficult for producers of lactation porn to find lactating women, especially if they are mothers who were willing to sort of sexualize themselves in that way, and so they had to sort of um, fill that void with illustrations. And so that's why a lot of what's out there is actually cartoons and such,
wow.
more so than available humans engaging in these fetishes online. Yeah.
And have you kind of found, has this become like your own sort of sub community within the BDSM community, that there's a group of you submissives that talk, or a group of the dominants that go and talk more about this?
I wish there were. Um, I know that there's online communities. I don't dip into those very much. I don't know of anyone within my local scene who is lactating, as a within the context of a power exchange dynamic.
Right.
So they're very welcome to reach out to me because that would be amazing to have someone to bounce, ideas and support off of. But at the moment, no, it's just me and my research and the support of the people around me that keep me motivated.
What about do like even the social media aspect? Do you spend any time looking at, different websites where people are talking about it so you can at least, find that kind of emotional connection and support with them?
Not really. I feel as though I put maybe a little effort into that at the beginning when I was trying to make decisions about what the process would be for me to relactate. And hearing from people who were doing that when it wasn't, when they weren't pregnant and expecting a baby. Um, and then I guess just nature and my own sort of common sense took over, and I felt like I had a grasp of what I was doing. It's it has been interesting in little nuances like having to get your dosages correct because, side effects of medication, those sorts of things. If I hit a wall there, then I might go online and sort of connect and research some more to get myself through that, mini hurdle. But on the main side, I don't really. I'm a very private person. Uh, my dominant is
Right.
also. We tend to keep things, quite sacred in our little bubble. So,
So how did he feel about you talking about this today?
I obviously made sure that I had permission to do so. Um,
Sure.
and I'm just a humble baby BDSMer, so uh, I don't feel like I have expertise to offer on this, just my own experience. What I had a moment, in fact, where I thought, why am I doing this? Why do I think I can do this? And I had a friend who posted a comment on your FET saying that they were looking forward to it and that it was actually really going to be really validating for them to hear someone talk about it. And I was like,
Hmm.
that's right. That's why I'm doing this because we need to help each other to take away some of the stigmatization that can happen around kinks that are a little bit more niche. DDLG gets it a lot, pet play to some degree, even slavery. I think it's important that we can help each other through that. And there was a common thread actually where some of the people who were coming forward were doing so trepidatiously in that there was some shame attached to their
Hmm.
fetishes. And
Absolutely.
if it can help, just one person feel a little more
Normal.
belonging, then
Yeah.
that's great. Mm.
Well, it's what's so interesting when we first look at the vanilla world that sex and it's been always utilitarian in that respect that it's the procreation to continue the line to help us farm the land. Eventually,
Mhm.
we've evolved as human beings to understand that there's pleasure inside of this, and
Mhm.
then as thankfully we've deconstructed the works of Marquis de Sade and Mesopotamian drawings of
Mhm.
orgies with implements and all of these things, and this wonderful fetish world was born. And
Mhm.
through all of that, we all culminate into a place under this large umbrella of fetishism, and we break ourselves down into smaller sub communities of some of us like leather, and there's the impactors, and you're right, the DDLGers and the poly people and so on and so forth, the exhibitionists, although I have different they're greedy to me sometimes. However, um, the reality is that inside of this community, this large acceptance of community, we still have people that don't understand. There are things that aren't mainstream. There are things that we
Yeah.
each individually enjoy doing. And
Mhm.
we're bringing this forth because we want to not only share our experience, but help the community grow and then potentially involve others in this. And we
Yes.
get hesitant because then we are worried about that feedback. I
Yes.
received so much positive commentary on that post, and I received a lot of positive emails. And like you said, I'm looking forward to hearing this. I do this kind of privately. It's really important, and thank you. And it was just I wanted to do this because I really find this subject fascinating. I really think that there is that connection, that intimacy on a deeper level. Um, One of the things that I was very curious about, what type of research was one of the first things you started looking at?
The research that I first looked at was the Goldfarb protocols, which was just it's just a very medical, technical side of things. I probably didn't, uh,
Right,
I didn't combine the two in terms of, I didn't put much research into the fetish side of lactation, because I think
right.
you can read as much as you like about, particular play, but it's still going to take on the nuances and the energy and the intent behind whomever's involved in that. So it's never a sort of a cookie cutter, learn, apply situation. Um, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Does does your lactation play with your dominant have any effect at all with your marriage and your husband?
Uh,
Is there any crossover?
no, so I have a beautiful vanilla marriage. We don't engage in kink together. And he's
Right.
very supportive of me, and I have the utmost gratitude for that, because it can be a confronting thing to bring home on a daily basis, to be connected to my pumps, as if it takes time away from my day. And so I'm very appreciative of him being open enough to allow me to do that. Yeah, I would say that everything's working quite well in that respect, and I'm very lucky. Mm.
Did you, and I know this is kind of one of the questions when we were talking before, but did you at any point, once you started getting engaged with this, re-inducing lactation, was there at any moment you're like, no, what am I doing? What kind of, what if this does end? What are the effects going to be on my body?
I am the kind of girl who uh, takes all of the information and doesn't make decisions lightly. I'm an
Right.
all-in kind of person in everything that I do across various sort of areas of my life. So for me, um, it comes down to, if I've chosen to submit to a dominant and I've chosen to be involved in that dynamic, I'm very open to um, doing everything within my capacity to add value to their life. And I knew that this was going to be something that made them extremely happy. And so that's where my motivation came from. And it sort of, I guess, in a way, overrides my own, um, not my, not my needs to a point that I don't have needs, but um, my dominance needs are more important to me when it comes to service. Yeah.
Right. No, that I mean, and that makes sense. I mean, that's really that's encompassing the DS lifestyle
Hmm.
on a completely whole different level.
Hmm.
And I think I've talked a lot about that when people sometimes enter the lifestyle and they don't realize what kind of commitment is really being asked of you. And that's on all sides. That's not just for a submissive, but for a dominant as well. Both
Mm.
parties have to be fully knowledgeable, be willing to go the distance. And and something like this, it's not necessarily for the lighthearted. Something I came across that was really quite interesting. And so I was curious now that I've got a chance to ask you, and you can't run and hide. Um, Part of this, my research has shown on the psychological side, there have been some cases in some of the studies I've read that some women, when their partners help them in a fetish capacity to start lactating, there is obviously the pregnancy fetish where people like having sex with pregnant women. But if a woman is lactating and they're being intimate, so having sex with their partner, or if you, for example, are just your dominant says, I just feel like nursing, the woman has achieved orgasm. Has anything like that ever happened to you?
Uh, I haven't achieved orgasm from nipple stimulation alone, but
Okay.
um, gosh, you've put me in a corner here.
I have. That's part of understanding these. We've got to understand the emotional impacts of some of these things.
I do find so when when I'm with my dominant, any of that sort of play um, feels very erotic to me. However,
Right.
when I would come home and spend time on my breast pumps alone, it felt more of a just a methodical sort of thing. However, that has become there's some change there in that I'm noticing that your brain sort of creates these neural pathways um, between two things, and so I can now find myself unsuitably aroused when I'm pumping, just for the mere process of pumping. And so there must be a connect that's going on there where it's putting two and two together in my
Right.
little brain. Yeah.
Well, if not, it's definitely going to be implanted now, and that'll be something for you and your partner to explore, and definitely in the future.
Mm,
Um, when you, as this has gone on, and obviously, you've more acclimated over time. Initially, in the beginning, as you were still approaching this, I mean, again, as you mentioned, body modification. What
mhm.
was that kind of emotional impact on you?
Um, I I think that it has had a positive emotional impact. I'm um I'm quite enamored by, there's some research behind the hormones involved in bonding, if you're talking about emotional impact. And obviously, men and women use different hormones to bond. Women tend to use oxytocin, which is achieved, through cuddles and affection, sort of
Hmm.
a non-stress bonding hormone. Men tend to rely on vasopressin, which is actually a stress bonder. And the way that they do so, we think back in time. If we go all the way back, we're looking at hunter gatherers, problem solving together. We are seeing camaraderie, um, experience between soldiers on the battleground. Any kind of shared project, which is why, men tend to even open up to other men and be vulnerable, more so if they're tinkering on a car or they're building something together. Um, and so, what I found it really really interesting is that when you go through a difficult but meaningful experience together, that can create some vasopressin bonding. And then if you factor in the nursing aspect of an ANR, then you're looking at oxytocin as well. So I think that's going to have just a scientific effect on any two people that go through this journey together. And it could probably be applied to BDSM as a whole, when you're looking at exploring the project of a rope scene or sadomasochism and getting through, a pain experience, a stress response together, and then aftercare. And I think that can be potentially why, or one of the reasons why, dominants and submissives can bond together in quite a deep way, if they're willing to do that. Yeah.
No, I mean, absolutely. We're still learning over time, especially with neuroscientists, are still learning about the different vasopressin and oxytocin type of relationship bond, and the variations that go inside of um, between the individual and their partners inside of those sexual differences,
mm,
how it affects their behavior,
mm,
regulation through the different peptides in their emotional responses to these attachments to their partner for longevity.
mm,
I know you had mentioned before, for example, I know you have a top who's just involved with you for rope, nothing more, just the beauty of the rope, which,
mhm.
you know, when you're involved in that, if at any given moment, obviously you start lactating, what is his or their response when that happens? Do they do the typical, oh, you're leaking, or is it like an ooh factor? Is it a ugh factor?
Mm,
Because for people that aren't involved, right? You see that, and we've had that such a stigma of
right,
mothers in public nursing, and people don't want to see that.
right. We're taught to desexualize nursing for sure.
Right.
I won't speak on someone else's behalf. To sort of maintain their privacy. But to answer
Sure.
your question, um, I have definitely lactated sort of in breast bondage situations, etc. And I do have a rope top who enjoys that. So there's no ick factor there, which is
Okay.
wonderful.
Well, I mean, it's just a question because,
Oh, it could
there's
happen.
some of us, yeah,
Hmm.
you get involved with people who aren't involved in that. And,
Hmm.
uh, I'm in my private life, I'm a sadist. So
Hmm.
it's lactation's not something I really ever came up. I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of questions to answer later on, but it's
Hmm.
never something that's really come up in my dynamic.
Well,
And
lactation and sadism can actually go together hand in hand very well. My rope top
I
is a horrible sadist, and
horrible in a good way. Let's
yeah,
not give sadist a bad name. Horrible in a
yeah,
good way.
like the best kind of horrible. So
Absolutely.
it has always been sadism that has caused my lactation in that rope room.
Interesting.
Mm.
And is that is that becomes, or is that enacted as a result of the sadism?
As a
So
result,
your natural.
not on purpose. Yeah, it's just something that your body, it's there. So depending on the scenario, um, it sometimes that will just happen. Hmm.
So
I'm in another corner.
compl- I see this. I'm sure you're going
Let
to have
me
a
up.
lot of questions to answer later on.
Mm.
Um, when you, as far as your dynamic with your dominant, that's where this fetish is this the primary fetish that you and kink that's between the two of you, or is this a subversive one that's kind of on the underlayers of everything else you do?
No, I would say that it's very much at the forefront of what we do, alongside just sort of uh, service submission, and we enjoy our protocol and sort of obedience training, and um, just the smaller, more subtle things of power exchange that tends to take up the majority chunk of our dynamic and what we both enjoy. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
Does does that, when you do you want to care to give a little bit more insight? And obviously you've discussed this, so I know you have been. People aren't going to, it's going to be hard. So I'm just going to say this straightforward. Some people don't understand, and in some of the dynamics of dominant submission, that we do ask, a submissive will ask for permission to talk on a subject.
Yeah.
So uh, the easiest way to say this is, how much latitude did you get to talk about this? Because that will either lead to my next question or lead to me rewording the question.
Okay. I mean, the negotiation was simply, I guess, entrusting me with being able to engage in this podcast and
Sure.
the knowledge that I would protect, what I thought was,
Private.
something more sacred to us.
Sure.
So if you ask
No,
the question,
absolutely.
yeah, so
You can decline, and that's fine, and I'm very respectful of that. I
mhm.
don't, this is not about. I'm trying to do a gotcha moment because that's not
This
what this is
sounds
about. This
scary.
is
Yeah,
well, no,
lay
it's
it
just
on me.
it's more of the curiosities. Do you get into the nuzzling? Is there the suckling and the nurturing? Is there,
So,
does it get into the masturbation while nuzzling and suckling or lactating is going on? I mean, I'm going to push the boundaries of wanting to know, because it's part of the understanding that emotional development that we go through when we're diving deeper into something where we're connected with, like you mentioned before, you're talking about a connection with someone on a level of trust
mm,
that's built on this foundation over time, where you're really committing to, regardless of what it is, if you're getting heavily into sadomasochism or rope or whatever the case may be, you're really committing to trust and erotic closeness and erotic power exchange with someone. So how, really, how far does it go?
so I will probably pass on sharing the details, but I will say that we definitely combine lactation with eroticism and with
Okay.
sex. And something that it has taught me, which might be a more of a diversion from your question now,
That's
is
okay.
that, someone asked me once if it felt toppy to be a person, that's in a nursing position within that dynamic. And
Sure.
my response to that was absolutely not. And something that I have been really curious to learn and to have it play out in my own dynamic is that there are no inherently toppy or bottom behaviors. It is definitely the intent, you know, that's driving behind it. I do what I'm asked to do. I am making milk for someone else. All the better if there's, a hand on my throat while I'm being consumed. It
Right.
um, is the intent behind it. I guess it sort of almost comes back to that, the oral sex debate in power exchange, or other dynamics that are
There's a
into.
debate about oral sex in power exchange.
Yeah, I've seen people who are debating, maybe
I
in a.
was being sarcastic.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, you've got me nervous, so now my sarcasm radar is not attuned.
That's quite okay. No, no, no. Don't be nervous. I mean, because it's fascinating, because you are talking about a world that really does, it encompasses a lot.
Mm,
There was a mutual friend of ours who made a wonderful joke about. I'm trying to find it now. The Milky Human fidget spinner, right?
yeah.
I think you know who
Sovereign
made that
thing.
comment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it is because there are. It takes us to a level that's primordial,
Mm,
where we're raised as children doing this. It creates that initial bond, and then over time, as we grow into our adulthood and we start to find the erotic component to it,
mm,
and we connect to that side, you are. And
mm,
when you add in the submissive side, you completely right. The aspect then changes, because you're ordered to begin lactation. You're ordered to produce at the behest of somebody else. So
yeah,
that control is still there. So it's interesting that
absolutely.
somebody thought that there was that top side, because they still, they're almost removing that. They're removing your position and trying to. I know it's just a question, but are you being put in that position? And
Mm.
I don't think that, for me, that doesn't wouldn't cross my mind. I mean,
But this
what
is
do
how
you
people
find?
grow in their understanding of BDSM.
Absolutely,
Yeah, by asking those
absolutely.
questions and engaging in these sort of conversations. And I think, you're the Milky Fidget Spinner. It touches, yeah, I love it.
I know he's gonna laugh over a glass of whiskey.
It it touches on, there's this crossover in lactation where for me it oozes femininity. Like women have sustained men on battlefields throughout history with their breast milk. It's like
Yes,
an elixir of life, which gives it an almost spiritual component. For me, it's a very elevated experience. But then I love to play with blur the edges of that, and then when you're adding power exchange in, um, and it's exactly what you are, or what I like to be, is sort of, a plaything, a toy. I like to watch someone's enjoyment of their kink, where I'm sort of a vessel, in essence, for them to explore themselves on a deeper level, or just on a playful level, depending where
right.
their head is at the time. Mm.
Well, I mean, the one thing that you're hinting at here becomes that whole surrogate pleasure reward response, and um, you know how you that's being received when somebody else is tasting or nursing or whatever the case may be. Um, and
Whether
that's
whether it's
go ahead.
sensual, or degradation, humiliation, pain, any of the things that I do engage in, my biggest love is that feedback loop of seeing another person's, pupils dilate with um, enjoyment, excitement, arousal. That is truly where I find my best self is.
You know,
Yeah.
you're kind of where you thrive at your pinnacle.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely more about others.
Well,
Kinky
it
people
becomes
pleasing
this.
tendencies.
Well, and people tend not to. That's becomes another part of the fetish community is when we're talking about objectification and just being used,
Yum.
strictly just being used, and that's another fetish I could probably definitely talk with you about
Oh god.
in the future because that's it's objectification is something completely different, and again, that's not for the
Mm.
faint-hearted. Um,
And it needs to
so
be
it's
done in the right
it's
way. There's this
yes,
polarity that for me, that's not speaking for everyone. Some people truly like to feel uncared for. I can't connect with that in my own brain. The polarity is necessary for me. I love to
hmm
feel used. I love to feel cherished. If I had one without
right.
the other, it wouldn't have, the same kind of cocktail. But you put them together, and that's like the sweet spot for me, I suppose.
Well, absolutely. You seem to here between the two of you, you seem to found that level of comfort within your dynamic, and where it seems to keep elevating over time, to the point where this connection now it's starts to transcend more than just BDSM, more than just the dynamic itself. It becomes its own dynamic, if that kind of makes sense.
Yes,
Because
I
it's
could.
the intimacy involved, the cherished moments that are involved.
Mm. I can't do just BDSM. I've never sort of been. Uh, Definitely, again, not judging people who differ from my own mental capacity, but pickup play was never really for me. The only time I sort of engage in casual play is with a very, very select few people um, who I share a beautiful friendship with, whether that's
Right.
my rope top, or a couple of my female friends who enjoy hurting me. um, there's still that component of trust there, and so um, everything transcends the action for me. I could never allow someone to do even some of the more lighter things, like take to me with a flogger if I had just met them.
Right.
That's not where my head exists.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, Yeah, you're definitely talking about the more intimate side, the connection where it removes where you're putting in the effort, you're doing the legwork, and you're starting the foundation with somebody, not just, hey, cool, you're attractive, I'm attractive, we both like this, let's just roll, which tends to happen a lot inside of the community, and why I think some people end up becoming disillusioned with a lot of the acts inside of the BDSM world because they don't take that time to. It's fine. I'm not against bottoms at all. There are some people that are like, cool, just tie me up, let's do our thing, and I'm going to go home. I
Mm,
don't want aftercare.
mm,
And those work for certain dynamics. But I also think in the fast food mentality that in the world that we live in, that sometimes we don't realize, like something like this, like lactation, it takes time. It takes a solid partner behind you. It takes your own effort researching the money behind, investing in the proper medications you're
yeah,
going to need,
yeah.
and all of that commitment. This has been absolutely illuminating today. I
I'm so
really,
glad.
I hate to stop here. I would in the new year. I think there's more on this subject to kind of, maybe touch base on, maybe bringing in the aspect of your objectification play with lactation and maybe how that rolls around. That'll be an interesting conversation you can have with your dominant.
Goodness
Um,
gracious.
well, there's no, quite a few of us
I
love
thought I'd
objectification.
I thought I'd survived a podcast, and now now there's the potential of another one coming over the horizon.
Well, you
Let me
you
sit
did
with
well.
that over the new year. Mm.
Well, look, I thank you so much, Brooke, for
No,
today.
no,
It's
thank you.
it's been wonderful. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and safe and joyous. And when we enter 2023, let's all be safe and have fun and produce more milk for everybody, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was a complete joy.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, until next time, everybody, be safe and stay kinky.